Welcome in to another episode of the Fantasy Football Forecast. I'm your host, Trevor Scott, joined by my co-host, Matt Giraldi.
What's going on, guys?
And today we are coming at you with Mock Draft Monday. We are going to be doing a 10-team SuperFlex 3-wide receiver league. And without further ado, let's get straight into it. Right, so I'm going to be drafting from the 5 spot. Matt is going to be drafting from the 8 spot. These are the spots that we have in our home league, so we're going to do our best to try to reflect what we would do in our home league in these situations. In our home league, the quarterbacks go a little bit slower, so these aren't going to be our exact teams, but we're going to give you the best insight we can into how this plays out.
And if you're in our home league, please turn it off.
You know, in our home league, I think CeeDee Lamb, maybe Tyreek Hill makes it to this, but I think CeeDee Lamb would be gone. So for the purposes of this, I'm going to take Tyreek Hill here.
I'm going to go with Amon-Ra St. Brown. I have him as my number 3 wide receiver, being that this is a 3-wide receiver league. I would love to get St. Brown in this scenario. I don't think it's going to happen in our draft next weekend, but one can pretend. Jamar Chase, Lamar Jackson, already, yeah. Sean. Ooh, interesting. Here's someone I haven't got in the second round, and don't know how realistic this is, but if it was to happen, Breece Hall is someone I would just run up and put on the draft board in this position.
Man, ahead of Jefferson.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I know it's 3-wide receiver, but I don't know. I haven't gotten any mocks with Breece Hall yet in the second round, so I'm very curious to see how this team turns out.
Yeah. Okay, and for me, with how fast quarterbacks are going here, I do want to try and highlight, if you get this opportunity, you should definitely take advantage of it in a 10-team league, especially if your quarterbacks are going off a little bit quicker. I think the fact that, there's been, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So there's been 6 quarterbacks taken, and one of them wasn't Anthony Richardson. So I'm going to take the upside of the quarterback there and kind of play to how this draft is playing out just a little bit, even though in a normal situation, I probably would have taken Garrett Wilson there. Oh man, Jonathan Taylor just went, which is okay because I'm going to try and go one of each here now, just because that seems to work out pretty well in the middle of the draft here. So I have a receiver, I have a quarterback, and now I'm going to take my number 1 tight end here, and I'm going to lock up Travis Kelce. And I think that there's enough running back talent down into the 4th round or into the 5th round that I can get my first one there and still be comfortable at the position.
Makes sense. There's a lot of wide receivers that I like still on the board, but I'm going to go ahead and take Jordan Love. I have Love ahead of Purdy. I think Love is set up for a really big year. I mean, we saw how he came onto the scene last year, and they've got some really good wide receivers. I think it's going to be a great offense, so I'm more than happy to lock him in as my.
Yeah, and I think as a rule of thumb, right, we're in a 10-team mock. You can see that the quarterbacks start to go off a little bit slower, right? Only 2 quarterbacks in round 3. So if you do feel compelled to take one early in the first 2 rounds, I don't think that you have to end up with somebody that you still think is going to be a top 10 quarterback.
Yeah. For me, the pick here is pretty obvious. I'm really high on Drake London this year. I think he's going to have a great year now that he finally has a good quarterback. So love the start. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Breece Hall, Jordan Love, Drake London. A lot of directions I can go in after this, and I feel pretty good so far.
Yeah, and so taking a peek at the running backs, I do have these 3 as in a tier kind of above, or a mini tier, I should say, above the rest of these guys. I have it ranked Pacheco, Achane, Jacobs, so in the exact opposite order that it appears here. And I was planning to go that way, but I did not think Brandon Ayuk was going to make it back to me. I know that there's the contract situation still outstanding, but he is trying to work through it with the 49ers. I do think they have the first 3 years kind of nailed down, and they're trying to figure out how they can get on the same page about the 4th year. So I personally think he's going to stay, and so I'm going to take Brandon Ayuk here. Waiting on running back at this point, too, is a little bit scary because you have to really hope that somebody you like falls, but I expect somebody in this range all the way down to kind of James Cook, Kenneth Walker. I would be comfortable with any of those guys. So again, making sure you have your players tiered and that you have an idea of who you're going to be able to get, I think is really important. So it looks like in this draft, again, I don't know how realistic this is. You could be sitting there saying there's absolutely no chance that Isaiah Pacheco is going to make it to my pick here, but just know that if he doesn't, right, that, say Rachaad White, Pacheco went instead of White and Achane went instead of Jacobs, and then you still end up with Jacobs or you still end up with White. So in this case, I'm going to take Isaiah Pacheco here.
Oh, there goes Achane. I was really excited to draft him, and I don't think he's going to be getting drafted behind Rashad White. But we see this every year. Like things can happen in the actual draft. People can push guys way up. So just think, because the computer seems a little bit crazy. Like things like this can happen, and always be prepared. But someone I really like here, tight end Mark Andrews. He's right now the fifth tight end off the board, which I think is a mistake. I have him as the tight end three, so I think the value of getting Andrews in the fifth round is great. Now I don't have to scramble for tight end, and I can look to either grabbing another quarterback here, a running back, or a wide receiver. This is interesting. I seem to get Nico Collins a lot in these mock drafts, and I really like Nico. I think he's going to be the number one on a great offense. So kind of rounding out those first three starting wide receivers, something I feel really good about.
Yeah, and somebody that fell to me that, again, I'm not sure how realistic this is, but maybe I shouldn't be saying that, is, I have a couple guys here, Deebo Samuel and James Cook. So, I feel very good about those guys. I did highlight in the camp notes over the weekend that James Cook has been struggling a little bit with pass protection and fumbling problems, so I'm a little hesitant there. And I do have Brandon Ayuk on this team already. So if I draft Deebo, I'm going to be getting two parts of that San Francisco offense. But at this point in the draft, I don't care that much. I'm going to be just going with Deebo Samuel, who's my top receiver available.
And if Ayuk gets traded, you could be sitting on a gold mine there.
Yeah, right. And I don't expect that to happen, but if it does, that's another additional upside to my team. All right. And so now I'm at a point where, looking at my second running back, I definitely feel like there's a decent drop off between Kamara and Jones. So the receiving upside here with Kamara, I think, is pretty high. And again, this isn't a pick I'm going to force. I know a lot of people love Kamara. A lot of people have him really high. I just enjoy letting him kind of fall to where I'm looking to draft running back, right? If he just happens to be there when I'm looking to get in on another running back, that's where I'm going to go. If not a big deal. Like I don't have a problem with James Conner, David Montgomery, Aaron Jones, even Ramondre Stevenson is my running back. The only guy here that I'd really avoid is Swift. So all of these other guys, though, are fine to me, but I'm going to get it on Kamara here.
Yeah, I like that pick. That's what I think you should have done. George Pickens off the board. Definitely would have liked him. Stafford, Cousins, Jaden Daniels. There are a lot of quarterbacks left that I think I might just end up waiting on that. And jumping on someone who I don't think I've mocked at all this year, but I think if he can stay healthy, T. Higgins is obviously a good flex player. Now that I'm starting three wide receivers, I'm very nervous, but the fact that I don't have to rely on him as like my two, for example, makes me want to kind of take a shot on that upside and swing him back around. Probably going to take quarterback here. Jaden Daniels, Stafford, Kirk Cousins. I'm going to go with Cousins.
Yeah, and something else to highlight on that T. Higgins pick, he still needed a quarterback. He said he liked all the players that were there, but something to consider, right, is Team 9 has two quarterbacks and Team 10 has two quarterbacks. So if you're in your draft and you're close to the swing pick, as you get later in the draft, make sure you take a peek at what they have too, right? Like say he still needed a tight end also, for example. Both of these teams, I guess Kittle just got picked, so that is the exact opposite, right? If he still needed a tight end, that maybe is a position he would attack because you would expect Team 9 to pick a tight end. So just make sure that you're continuing to follow and track the teams closest to you and what they would need and what they probably are looking at trying to do. Okay, so with my pick here, I need a quarterback at this point. I kind of have filled in all of my starting positions other than my flex. And so, I could look at trying to lock up one of these running backs or receivers. But I think at this point, looking at the quarterbacks available, like I definitely have Matthew Stafford ranked the highest. I do think that he is going to be in a very stable offense and should be a very consistent producer week over week, two elite options in the passing game as well. So I'm going to go with Stafford. And I'm going to fill my flex with whoever decides to fall to me, in this next pick. So let's pull up the flex players and start talking about that here. I do prefer to get in at wide receiver as a flex, but that's also something that you can continue to fill your bench with a bunch of additional wide receivers. So you don't have to force a wide receiver pick necessarily. I do think of these players available, I do like Zamir White the most of the running backs, and I do like Calvin Ridley the most of the receivers, although Rashee Rice to me is right there at this point. I don't expect him to get suspended, and Hollywood Brown got hurt. So at the beginning of the year, he could be in store for a major target share and could be in a very good spot with that Chiefs offense. For me, though, I'm going to take a peek at the running backs and just see, like, after White, I don't expect James Conner to make it back to me. And I think that this is kind of a very noticeable step down from how I feel about White. So I'm going to get in on White first and then try and figure out my fourth, fifth, and sixth wide receivers after that.
James Conner. Damn, that's what I was going to target there. And if I was to able to get James Conner, and that would be kind of the perfect example of why waiting on quarterback or like running back in a hero RB build can work so well, because I think Connor is, set up for a big year in the games that he's healthy. I don't expect him to play all 17 games, but definitely bummed I missed out on that pick. I'm set at tight end. I'm set at quarterback, at least for now. Looking at other running backs, Najee Harris, Jonathan Brooks. I'm going to go with Najee. That team wants to run the ball. I do have high expectations for Warren this year to take a big step forward, but I think to start the year, and because I might be playing musical running backs, just the way that I've built this team, he's someone I can at least start week one and kind of feel out the situation, because they do want to pound the ball, and I expect him to get a lot at the goal line. Moving over to
another
the wide
thing
receivers.
for Najee, another thing for Najee Harris too. Make sure you follow this Jalen Warren injury, because he did get hurt in his in the preseason game. So just make sure you watch how serious that's going to be. If he's going to miss any time, I would push Najee up the board quite a bit. Arthur Smith wants to run the ball, and I could see Najee getting 30 touches a game until Warren's back.
Yeah.
So he could be in for a massive workload early in the year and could be a good hero RB target.
Yeah, that's a great point. And the next pick for me, very easily done. We've talked a lot about Calvin Ridley. I think his value on sleeper is a little bit crazy, and can't pass him up here.
So now that I have 3 running backs here, right, and 3 receivers, I definitely would like to get back in on the receivers. And a guy I talked about at my last pick, who's probably not going to get suspended, right, Rashee Rice. I definitely love being able to take him here. If he had gone, I would take Ladd McConkey. I do like Ladd McConkey quite a bit. And again, another mock draft where we get Calvin Ridley on sleeper. He is just going way too low on sleeper, right? You see McConkey go, Pollard, Moss, Deontay Johnson. I would have liked to get him for sure. I really think that he's going to be a target hog there, even in a bad offense. So I think he's worth picking. Taking a peek at the wide receivers, I think there's a lot of sameness here. I did in the camp notes mention that Brian Thomas Jr. is getting a lot of hype right now. He's gotten the unguardable tag. He's got deep speed in a way that when they put the pads on, I think translated very well. So for the purposes of this, I want to highlight getting a receiver that I like in this area. I know Keon Coleman's your guy, so probably pains you to see me push Brian Thomas ahead of him, but I'm going to take Brian Thomas Jr. here.
I like that pick. Looking at my board here, looking at some of the flex players, I only have 2 running backs, so I'm going to take Devin Singletary, who I know is going to be the starter. I know he's going to get a lot of volume. Might not be the sexiest pick in the world, but someone I can feel pretty comfortable about, at least in the beginning of the year, just based on how I built this team. Couple guys here now: Jackson Smith and Jigba, Christian Watson. I'm going to go with JSN. I've talked about him, kind of earlier in this offseason. I think he's going to take a big step forward. I think the new offensive coordinator is going to utilize him in a much better capacity. Tyler Lockett's not getting any younger, and I think that he's someone that we could see have a nice jump in production. And again, not someone that I have to start right away, right? I've got 4 stud wide receivers, and I can just be patient with him.
Yeah, Lockett's dealing with a little bit of an injury too, and JSN's another guy I mentioned in the camp notes as a possibility of being the starter in 2 wide receiver sets. So if he's going to see a snap share increase into the 80 plus, I think he's going to break out this year. He has a lot of talent, and I really expect that if he is going to be used that heavily, he will be somebody that you're going to be able to start. So obviously a quarterback hasn't gone now for multiple rounds, so maybe the quarterback that I'm going to choose won't be here, but I think in round 12 of SuperFlex drafts, 10, 11, 12, that's where you kind of maybe want to be looking at getting in on quarterback. When you play 3 wide receiver and flex, right, that means you have 9 starters. So, there is a little bit more urgency to get some good players on your bench before you go back to quarterback. But I'm going to go with Deshaun Watson here. And I'm more inclined to pick a quarterback, maybe a third quarterback, maybe a little bit earlier than I would otherwise. when I wait on my second quarterback, right? So I got Stafford, who I have as like a low end QB2 in my rankings, and I picked him in the eighth round. So making sure that I secure one of those, 22 to 24 possibly quarterbacks, I think is a little more important when you wait on quarterback like that. All right, so a lot of running backs go off the board there, which is unfortunate because I was thinking about going back to running back after going Rice and Thomas back to back. So I'm still going to do that. I'm just going to go a guy that I might not even start right away, but I'm going to go with Jerome Ford. He should be the starter to begin the year, and depending on how Chubb heals and depending on the role that they give Chubb once he's back, I think that Ford could possibly even be a good pick beyond that, in the same way that Zach Moss was when they were bringing Jonathan Taylor back last year.
Yeah, I think that's a good pick. And in the spirit of also selecting a third QB late, someone who I wouldn't necessarily expect to make it this far, but we've seen him ranked as QB 29 on ESPN, so you never know. Geno Smith, kind of what I talked about with Jackson Smith and Jigba, and this offense kind of taking a step forward. Not that it was horrible last year; it was obviously great 2 years ago, but maybe a late round stack flyer for bye weeks or something like that. Very low risk stack, I will say. All right, now looking back at running back, because I only have 3 and I want to leave the draft with 4. Chuba Hubbard, again, kind of like a Devin Singletary, where he's not necessarily the flashiest pick, but we know Jonathan Brooks is not going to start the season healthy, so I'm confident that he'll be getting a lot of volume at least to start the year. He's someone, if when Brooks comes back healthy and takes over that role, can easily cut him.
Yeah. And so looking at the receiver, I'm not super excited about anything there. This is probably the area where you consider a second tight end if that's something that you want to do. But again, I'm not inspired really by any of these guys, and I have Kelsey, so I don't think I need to do that. And I just picked my third quarterback already, so that lands me at running back, which if I was in your spot, I would have taken this guy, Rico Dowdle. I think he's getting very good camp reviews. I think he's going to be the number one. I know Zeke is there, so maybe Zeke gets volume in a way that he shouldn't, and Dowdle is more the change of pace back, but I think there's opportunity here for Dowdle to get 10 to 12 touches in week 1 even, and if he does that, I think that that's going to be somebody that you're going to want on your roster, because I think that could just lead to additional growth and role if he is pretty efficient, or if he just looks significantly better than Zeke does. So I think that that's something that I do expect Zeke to kind of get the work early, but I think Dowdle will be there. He's been the better back in camp, so I think that that's a role that can grow over the season. So if he has any sort of work in week 1, that's somebody that I'd kind of hang on to, and I would try not to cut as part of the week 1 waiver wire. And then could kind of go any way here, right? Obviously, all the quarterbacks are very high, so let's look at the flex. And I'm going to round out my team with the receiver. Joshua Palmer, I think, could be the number 1 on the outside for the Chargers. Obviously, I think McConkey is going to be the most heavily targeted, but Palmer could get the deep shots. And so in the last round, I think he's a fine target to select.
Oh, there goes Xavier Legette. I love Legette.
You're in your rookies, man.
I've talked him up quite a bit, but I'm going to do something a little bit different just to kind of showcase for those of you that are still with us. If you have your drafts, a week, 2 weeks before the regular season, and you've got IR spots, and there's either someone is going to be on the pup or there's a chance they miss time. That's someone late that I want to target. I think Josh Downs here, I think he's going to have a solid year, assuming he comes back and healthy. What I would do with this, is if he does go on pup, throw him in that spot, and then, take another guy.
All right, yeah. And so a quick look at the overall draft board here. I went Tyreek Hill, Anthony Richardson, Travis Kelce, the first 3 picks. Obviously got in on different positions on all of them. You kind of reflected that too, except for you got a running back in there. So my receiver group that I would have as my starting 3 is Tyreek, Ayuk, and Debo. I know double dipping at SF receivers might not be the ideal strategy for some of you, but I really think that group of receivers has very high upside for me. So I'm happy with how that turned out for not selecting them super high. And to compare to yours too, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, and Nico Collins as your starting 3. So the way I have it ranked, I have Hill over Brown, I have Ayuk over London, and I have Debo over Collins. So I'm obviously going to like my receivers better in this draft than yours, but you have London over Ayuk, and you have hopes for London to have like very, very high upside in a way that I don't think Ayuk does. And Nico Collins, same thing, right? If he is going to be the one and getting like 25%, 30 to 27% target share in this offense, he's got upside in a way that Deebo Samuel doesn't as well. So maybe if you want to look at the running backs or the quarterbacks too.
Yeah, I was going to say, I love anchoring my team with Amon-Ra St. Brown, and on the flip side, also anchoring it with Brees Hall as well. And then, like you mentioned, if Warren does miss time, Najee's just going to be wheels up, even if he's not the most electric runner. Singletary is going to be the starter for maybe the whole season. Chuba Hubbard, kind of a whatever pick, but like I said, with Brooks out, I feel confident with only needing to start two running backs, where with Brees Hall, I can kind of just play the matchups with if needed and jump to the waiver wire throughout the season. So overall, I do like this team. Andrews is in the fifth. Like, give me that all day. But yeah, not the best team I've ever drafted, but something I would feel comfortable walking away from the draft with.
All right. With that, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one.